Easiest way to compose a landscape is by planning the foreground, midground, and background. You can choose natural elements for each layer, and this will give the image depth. This landscape painting will be mostly monochromatic, so I'll only be using white, blue, black, and a touch of yellow acrylic for warmth. I'm using wax paper as my painting palette, which is taped to my table. I also do have a water cup to wash and dry my brushes with. Make sure you have some tissue. Make sure you also have some brushes. I'm probably just going to be using a medium and a small brush. If you would like to get started with the sketch, you can. Just remember the bottom, you want to have something, the middle, you want to have something, the top, you want to have something. So if you wanted to do a river or some ice that's frozen over, what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to put my pencil in the middle. I just want to figure out where that line is. Where do I separate the ground or the river from the mountains and the sky? So that's just a line. So if this is the middle, I've just got a line underneath there. Put a little ground here. I'm just going to make a little bump here. I'm not going to draw the tree in yet. I'm going to make like an oval shape on this side. So this is where I'm going to put some extra land or extra details. So kind of like the picture we see in on the side here. I want to fit a little house in as well. I'm going to add some mountains with some triangle shapes. Just make sure they're different sizes. Also make sure in your artwork that your mountains don't have to be perfectly like straight. So if you want to make some zigzag shapes, they look a little more realistic if you give that a go. So some of them are kind of zigzag shapes, some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. So if you remember our flat line here, remember the first line that we drew? I'm just going to draw a little bumpy line really close to that. And what that's going to look like is small trees. Small trees for later. I'm just going to take some tape and tape down the back of my artwork because I'm realizing it's moving quite a bit. So you can find a sun or a moon. It's up to you what you find here. I'm just going to move it a little bit. I like it a little bit smaller and a little bit closer. So I drew two, but you're going to see I'm going to erase one. Just go lightly in case you want to change things. It's okay if it doesn't disappear entirely because acrylic paint's going to cover all that up. I'm going to add a cabin kind of in the middle section here. So to do that, I'm just going to do two lines. I'm going to make it kind of small. So two lines, I'm going to make like the triangle shape up top. I'm just going to add two lines that come out of the side here. And then a straight line, and you're just going to add the roof. So the roof is like two lines on the side. But that's pretty much it. I'm going to get started with our paint soon. I haven't drawn any big trees yet because I'm going to paint those. It's a little bit easier to explain with paint than with my pencil. So that's pretty much it. I've got everything that I'd like. I'm going to start with the sky. What's really far away? And I'm going to start with some white. We are going to do the mountains right after that. So you are on the right track. I'm just going to get some white and I'm going to make a puddle of white first. So usually on my palette, I'll take some white. I'll use my white puddle first. So I'm just going to leave a little puddle there. I'm going to make this about like a giant eraser size. So don't use too much, but you will probably need it later. I still have white on my brush. Whenever you're not using a brush, just make sure to wipe off the extra and then put it in your water cup, okay? So it doesn't dry out. And I'm going to put a little pile of blue somewhere. If you have lots of space on your palette, make sure that you use all the space. I'm going to be using a smaller space just so I can show you everything on camera. But you'll notice my blue is a lot smaller than my white, right? Keep that in mind. So what I'm going to actually do first is I have white. I'm going to make two piles of white, okay? Make one pile that has a little bit of white for everybody, and then one pile that has a little more white. And what you're going to do is you're going to add a little bit of, I'm just going to move this up here, a little bit of blue to one pile, and then a little more to another pile, and then just give them a mix. So you're just going to make two different kinds of blue. So we're just making a light blue and a slightly darker blue. So I have a light blue, I have like a medium blue. If you want to make a slightly darker blue, you'll see me making it right now. Do you see how I have three different blues here? Once I have three, I want to start with the lightest color. So that means I might have to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to start around the moon or the sun here. So I'm going to take the lightest blue. So I'm just going to go around my moon. Do you see how I'm going around the moon in that circle shape? Just follow that circle shape. The one trick I'll give everybody is painting is really easy to mix when the colors are wet. Okay, so just put the light color down. I'm moving into my middle blue here. If I keep going in this circle direction, it's okay if you go over the mountains a little bit because we'll do those next. But you want to go side to side. You want to follow your circle direction. So I'm just going in like U shapes. I'm going back into the light blue that I made and I'm going back out. I don't want to go into the mountains too much, but if you go over them a little bit, that's okay. And I'm just going to fill in the rest of the sky. So I'm still following, you know how there was a circle in the middle? I'm still going like C-shaped. You see how I'm making like a curved shaped? So I'm just going to follow that. I'm going to go all the way to the outside. For our mountains, we're going to use two colors, or at least two colors. A darker blue and then a very light blue for snowy areas. So I'm just going to try to make a darker blue. So a darker blue you can make by just using blue, but I'm going to use a tiny bit of black. So I'm going to use a lighter blue area for snow and a darker blue area for my mountain. I'm going to make a dark blue. So I'm making a gray, and then to make sure it's not fully gray, I'm just adding a little bit of blue. But I'm making like a gray, bluey mountain. See if you can outline your mountain line first, okay? So I'm just finding my mountain again, just outlining it. See if you can find the top of your mountain. And you notice my sky, I went into my mountain a little bit. That's okay, because we're doing that right now, right? Just like trees, just like people, all the lines aren't perfectly straight, right? So you might want to add a couple of bumps in. I haven't added snow yet. If you see the tops of the mountains, like the top of the triangle, one side usually has a little more snow or a little more light than the other side. So if this is my moon here, on one side it's going to be darker. So almost like a triangle, I want you to maybe draw like a line in the middle, like a dotted line. So you can try that in a couple of your big mountains. You can do a dotted line on the big mountain, the big triangles. Try to find the big triangles. And what I'm going to do is on one side, I'm going to make it a little darker. The dotted line is to help you figure out the side that might be a little darker. So if this is the moon or the sun, the side that's not facing the sun is usually a little bit darker. It's okay if they go into each other a little bit because you will have shadows and different things. And then I'll come back and add some snow in. So just remember, on one side of your moon, they all go one way. On the other side of your moon, that shadow should go the other way. I did make a line at the bottom for some trees, so I'm just going to outline that so I know where my mountains stop. And then you can fill in most of your mountains with a light gray, a dark gray. Now that you've got some gray inside, you can add some white to your gray and try some different areas of gray. And then we'll add some snow in after. So I'm just adding some short lines of different grays, just different directions, up, down, sideways. I'm just adding it all over the mountain. I still want to see some of the dark gray, but you'll see I'm trying to fill most of it up. If you're starting to lose some of your shadows or some of your dark areas, you can always draw them back in. Sometimes you can use like a dark gray, and they'll have like little lines and stuff in the lighter colors. So in the lighter colors, I'm just adding some like short lines and stuff. If you want anything to be a little bit darker, you can add more black to it. So I'm just adding some slightly darker parts back in. So you want to have different kinds of grays here on your mountains. I think that's the biggest thing to remember, okay? Try to have some light grays, try to have some dark grays. We're going to have a little bit of white for snow, but fill up most of your mountain. Just make sure you have different kinds of grays in your mountain. You can help support us to make free arts education. Join our Patreon and get special member perks like critiques and classes. So for snow, I'm just going to wash and dry this brush, make sure it's nice and clean. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of white. I don't need a lot to do this. And then just while it's wet, I'm going to take off any extra. And I'm just going to put it on top of some of the areas of the mountain. So I'm just dotting it on, kind of like a toothbrush, or like if I was just touching it with a feather. You want to touch it really lightly. And then I'm just dotting on a little bit of the extra white. So I don't have a lot of paint on my brush, actually. You can see how much white I have. Very little, right? So once you've got dark areas on your mountains, you can dot on some light areas as well. I'm just building some snow on top of these mountains by using very little bits of white. And by using very little amounts of white, this is actually called like a dry brush effect. I'm just going to make a light blue that I'm working with to start the water. And then while it's still wet, I can go side to side and add a little bit of the grays back in. So I'm just going to start by outlining the water here. Now I'm just going to block it in. That's pretty much my one side of the river. Other side of the river, just blocking it in. Keep going side to side, it'll help blend it in. It's okay if you go over your ground a little bit. And I'm just going to fill in the river first. So what I'm going to do while this is wet is I'm going to take up a little bit of the gray I had before. I'm going to dot it into where I want the reflection to be. If this is a triangle here, then somewhere along here, there's also going to be a little bit of a triangle, upside down triangle. So those are kind of where my reflections are going to be. If I go side to side while it's wet, you'll see what's happening, right? It's starting to blend in a little bit. If it's not turning gray enough, I can add more gray to it. So you can see a little bit of gray starting to happen in my water. That's pretty much it for my reflection. Just keep it wet. And then after this, I'm just going to do my ground. Since I already have blue on my palette, I just want to pick out a little bit of yellow. I'm just going to make my own dark green. So making dark green, I'm going to use blue, yellow, and then to make it darker, I'm going to use a little bit of black or more blue. So I'm just going to mix a little bit of yellow, a little bit of blue. So this dark green is starting to happen. So to make it darker, I just use more blue. I'm just going to use a little bit of black, just a little. I don't want it to get too dark. And this is what I'm going to use for my ground. Since I've used mostly blue so far, I'm going to make it more blue than green. And then when you see it on the painting, you're just going to see me outline the space first. Once you've outlined it, you can fill it in a little. If you want to have a little bit of this reflecting in the water too, you just have to make sure that your water is still wet. If it's not wet, you can always use a little bit of the color from before and add it in. A dry brush technique can work really nicely to mimic water. Just dry your brush and use the side of it to gently tickle the color onto the canvas. So I'm gonna get my trees. The trees, do you see how there's like this line that I left beside the mountains? I'm gonna use whatever color I used for the ground here, just make it a little bit lighter and then put it in. So I'll show you what that looks like as well. To do that, I'm just using whatever blue that I had, light blue, green. I'm gonna take my medium brush or my small brush, any brush that you can make kind of pointy. And I'm going to make a little bit of that pile with white. You can either fill that line in really lightly. So I'm just filling it in a little. And right now it's still like a darker blue. So I'm just going to make it a little bit lighter so it looks kind of snowy. So I'm just using white for that. And then I'm just going to make some short lines that go up and down. From the distance or from far away, it starts to look like trees that are very far. So this is on the line of like the water. I'm going to slowly build in some trees that are closer. I got to build in my house as well. On one side of the house, I'm just adding some blue for some shadows. So I'm just filling in my house here. So I might just go over the house with a little bit of snow or a little bit of white. I'm going to start some tree details. I'm just going to draw the trunk, the tree trunk. Okay, that's going to decide how tall it is. I'm just going to have one tree that comes up and then I'll have one that's a little bit shorter. But I don't want to cover too much of my background, right? We worked pretty hard on it. So I'm just going to make a thin line that goes to the ground. And I'm just going to fill it in using my small brush. So I'm just making some trees. Maybe I've got like another thin tree right beside it. So I'm going to make another thin one. This one's going to be a lot thinner, I think. It's not going to be a big tree. But usually the bottom of a tree is a little bit bigger than the top. So if you want to make it a little bit wider. We're now painting the foreground, and these trees frame the composition and add depth to the painting. The subject here is the cottage in the midground. And now I'm painting the trees in the midground, which will be a lot smaller in size. I'm keeping a really simple silhouette, and I'll add some snow to the branches later. So I add a little bit of snow. I'm just going to add a little bit of snow to the ground as well. So just little speckles of snow, just so it looks like matches the trees. I'm just going to dot on little bits of snow here. And then I add a little bit to the trees. Otherwise, I'm just making it look really snowy, leaving a little bit of the ground to peek through. Join a virtual class to learn live from our professional artists. Get creative assignments, individual guidance, and real-time feedback on your artwork. Start today and level up your practice. If you learned something new, please like and share this with a fellow art nerd. If you love receiving quality and free arts education, subscribe. Here are a couple other videos you can check out next.